What's up, guys? ClutchFan37 bringing you a new review of the StringKing Type W lacrosse head as well as the mesh piece. Little disclosure, obviously I do not play women's lacrosse, but I'm super stoked to see lacrosse mesh come to the women's game, especially all these companies diving into it. StringKing dove into it head first, literally with a brand new head. I think they have a composite metal chef coming out and a full piece of mesh, so I'm going to give you guys my review, my opinions on it, and if you're a guy player, I think you could learn something from this review. If you're a women's player who happens to see this review, definitely check it out and hear my opinions. Like I said, don't play women's lacrosse, but let's dive into it. Says string both. I would compare the elasticity and the feel of it to almost a Type 2 or even Type 3 with less grip, which I think is really cool. Obviously Type 4, it's very elastic, there's a lot of stretch to it, and you don't want that in women's sticks. You want something that stays consistent, and you don't want the pocket to stretch because this, as shallow as it is barely pushing the limits with legality. So feel is like a Type 3, I'd say in between Type 2 and Type 3. The stitching down here is very tightly woven, so this mesh piece right here does not stretch at all, which allows for the pocket to be nice and flat down here so the ball doesn't sink lower, but also creates the pocket to just naturally sit higher. From there, stringing the outsides here is pretty simple. The most outer rows of diamonds do stretch completely, so you can get the knots down here. You don't have to worry about trying to string something super thin, which I think is really cool. I think it's a great innovative part. I think it's something StringKing did right and something unique that no one's done yet. From there, the string kit will come with 4 sidewall strings, which is pretty generic. You can get away with just 3 for the top, the 2 sides, and the bottom string because, as you can see here, it's fairly tight. Not a lot of slack here. I used an old Gimalac sidewall string I had laying around. That was good length. From there, you get one shooting nylon that's meant for the men's sticks, or the same length for men's sticks, and the U1 is meant for the goalie. So the U1 is a lot longer, as you can see. I mean, I got the full U in here, and I clipped it because it came out to here. So string kit-wise, you get the whole 9 yards. You get everything you need, and plenty of extras in case you mess up or want to try to string it up a little differently. Diving the actual head, the head is priced at $69.99, the same price as the Legend Senior Series or the Legend Senior top-of-the-line head, which $70 for women's head is pretty good. I believe they will be offering complete sticks. I don't know the exact price, but I think the complete strung head from StringKing will probably be about $100. So you got the $70 head, $25 mesh, $10 string kit. Probably about $100, $110, I'd say, but we'll find out in March. So as always, huge shout out to StringKing. They sent over the Type W head as well as 2 complete Type W stringing kits, which is awesome. Before we dive into the review, just a little background information. When mesh was first announced that was legal for women's sticks, a lot of people went the route of, instead of doing a whole mesh pocket, they were doing just the runner being mesh. You know, ECD came out the Venom runners. Other people, Laxtractive is one who's very big in this, and they made a diagram that shows you how to cut a piece of Hero Mesh or StringKing mesh perfectly to where you get 2 runners, which I think is really cool. I think mesh in a women's head is very good. The only issue with this is once they announced it, it overcomplicated stringing. The whole idea was supposed to obviously help women's performance and players and the style of play change, but it also is supposed to make stringing women's sticks a lot easier because for anyone who has ever strung a women's stick, it is a little more complicated than you think. You know, for someone like me, when I first saw it and I first started doing them, I was just stringing a very flat traditional and really messing with the pocket up high. But as you dive into it more with the different runners, it becomes a bit more complicated. So I thought that adding mesh to a women's stick would make it easier, when in fact it made it much more complicated. Throwing a mesh runner down here and then attaching the mesh so it does the right tension, the right pocket depth. And with all the performance meshes out there with elasticity, that stretch, it caused a bit of issues when it came to stringing mesh because, you know, you get a 10-year-old girl who wants to string their own stick, they learn how to do it with leathers and runners, and then all of a sudden they can do it with mesh. It just starts to overcomplicate things. Fossey Hola, I believe that's her name, I don't want to mispronounce it, and Laxtractive are 2 of the biggest women's stringers I know of and I follow on Instagram, and they've been doing all sorts of different mesh pockets and mesh runners, and it's so cool to see just the evolution of women's stringing because now it's taking 5 steps up. From there, like I said, StringKing is the first company, I believe, to do a full mesh piece designed for women's sticks. With the elasticity of mesh, obviously if you string up a normal piece of StringKing or Hero, no matter what you do down here where the pocket is not supposed to be for women's, it's going to bag out a bit. You're going to get just kind of a banana of a pocket that doesn't work. Women's lacrosse, the pockets are meant to be mid to mid-high, just because they don't cradle one-handed, they cradle two-handed, and there's other legality things like that I don't really know just because I'm not a women's player. In the past, I have strung a lot of women's sticks. I used to work at Breakaway, which is a huge lacrosse store here in Colorado before they went under, and I was kind of their lead stringer where I was stringing men's, women's, traditionals, the whole 9 yards. So I know enough about stringing a women's stick that I felt comfortable diving into this and messing around with it. But like I said, the mesh runners and mesh pieces in women's stick I think is awesome and huge. There's a lot of players who are slowly transitioning to it, and with the new StringKing Type W coming out in March, I think come summertime or late spring for NCAA, you might see some players using the full mesh piece. So without further ado, let's dive into the actual review, my thoughts on this, and like I said before, I do not play women's lacrosse. I've never really done a whole lot of women's lacrosse stuff, so my review may not be the best. You'll probably be better off looking at someone else's, but regardless, listen to what I have to say. Maybe some things I say will intrigue you, and overall, pretty sweet stuff. So diving into the actual review of the head, obviously we went over the mesh kit, and there's nothing too crazy to it, but the head itself is priced at $69.99 unstrung, which is a really good price for women's heads. I see a lot of women's heads are up there at $150 range, even strung up, so $70 unstrung. I believe they will offer pre-strung options on their website or probably through their retailer, so that'll probably be $110 for the head, I'd say, just because the head is $70, the mesh kit is $25, or the mesh is $25, the kit is $10. So that's $105, so maybe like $120. But regardless, $70 head, really can't beat that. It follows the Legend series where it just has the 2 sidewall struts here, which is really good. The only thing I'm a little iffy on is the 29 stringing holes. I really like the idea. Women's sticks, obviously you want a higher pocket, so having 29 holes up here in the top portion of the head is really good for stringing. You can really zone it in or angle it into the pocket you want and make it pretty precise. From there, down here, it's pretty simple. Just skip 3 or 4 holes and then make sure this is nice and flat. But 29 string holes is a blessing and a curse. For men's lacrosse, it's great. Women's lacrosse, I assume they will have a U-string pocket for this, or I'm pretty sure they will. And then from there, the custom strung ones that they do, or the pre-strung ones, should be strung up pretty well. From there, obviously 6 top holes, 4 bottom holes, which is good for leathers if you do like the StringKing head, but you want to stick to a leather pocket, or even a mesh runner. It has the 4 holes down here, which is good. Throat locking bolt system here, which is pretty popular in all the Mark II heads and all the Legend Senior heads, and pretty much all of StringKing now. So I assume with that is their women's heads will have the big hole in the front so you can lock this in. But the actual head, I mean, for $70, you really can't beat that. It's made out of nice plastic. It's not horribly flexible. It's not horribly stiff, so it's right in between, which is about what the Legend Senior Series was. I think that eventually they'll come out with a Legend women's head, or a Legend Senior, which will be a bit better, a bit more priced, or higher priced, and overall probably better quality. But for first offering, I think the StringKing Type W mesh and W head is awesome. Stringing it up, obviously, like I said, I've strung plenty of women's sticks with leathers and runners. Mesh sticks, I've strung plenty of traditionals and plenty of mesh sticks, so I could kind of get a feel for it. Just did some knot at a size to keep it nice and flat. If you're a woman or a girl who wants to play lacrosse and you see this review, definitely check out how to string up the knot at SI. I think it'll improve your mesh stringing tenfold, especially with this stuff. I think it's great. Getting down here in the bottom portions, you definitely want to have an SI to keep it nice and flat. You don't want to have ones because it will jumble up and cause some issues. But overall, Legend W head, I think it's going to be great. It's not too pinched, it's not too wide, so I think it's good. Pretty good, just overall standard head. I think this one would be geared a bit more for attackers, or whatever the equivalent for offensive players is in women's lacrosse. Like I said, please don't bash me. I've never played before. But right here, nice tight flare, which is good for lacrosse. It's also fairly wide, so like I said, just a very generic head that I think is going to play very well. The biggest thing with StringKing coming into the women's lacrosse game is obviously their mesh piece. Head-wise, I think that when they come out with the newer version or the more elite version, it'll probably be a little better, and they'll have two different versions, one geared for offense, one geared for defense. But until then, the mesh itself is awesome. I think if you're a girls player, you should definitely pick up a piece when it comes out in March. $25 for a piece is a bit expensive, plus the string kits, you're looking about $35, probably $40. But most women's stringing kits are about $40 to $50 anyway, so it's really cool. It's a nice investment. It's fun to mess around with, and honestly, this thing rips. It has been snowing here, so I did take this out in the snow for a little bit and did some wall ball and just a couple of dummy shots, no offense. And with the mesh, you're able to string up a pocket that really sits nice and high right on the U shooting string. holds the ball fantastically, and just having the two nylons here that are pretty thin and tightly woven, it creates a nice amount of snap and feel. But like I said, if you're a women's player, you want to dive into it, this is definitely something I think you should. I really enjoy this stuff. I never played a women's lacrosse, but I'd feel confident taking this out in men's league and actually playing with it, which says a lot because my sticks are nice and baggy, but this is a cool offering. So lastly, before we end this video, overall the W series from StringKing is awesome. A whole setup for you to string yourself is going to run you about $105, which is pretty good compared to other stuff out there. Obviously, just the head itself, they will come out with a composite shaft and a metal shaft for the women's heads, which is great. They will have a U-string pattern, which for those who don't know, basically it tells you their ideal pocket and how you should string it up. If you've never strung a mesh before and you want to try it out. Otherwise, from there, if you do know a little bit about stringing mesh, or you can watch some tutorials, there are plenty of tutorials on knots, and you can mess around with the pattern. The coolest thing about this mesh, I think, is the weave down here. It's so tightly woven that this, like I said before, doesn't stretch at all. It will, since it is mesh, allow the pocket to sit just a little lower, sit right where that's right where the stitches start, so you can have a pocket that shifts a little bit. But from there, if you string it up decently, and you're supposed to angle it up here higher in the pocket, the ball's going to sit there naturally, and with the two shooting cords right here, the way that StringKing has them, all you have to do is tighten them or loosen them for the different feel, and you can really get some snap and some whip out of this. Like I said, I don't play women's lacrosse. I've never really played women's lacrosse. I've messed around with sticks before, strung way too many in my lifetime, and I think that this is an awesome offering. Obviously, like I said before, you have many of women's sticks. The new mesh pieces, a lot of people are cutting the mesh and making mesh runners down the middle, which is great. The only issue with that is with baggage. The mesh will stretch a bit and cause a bit more bagging, which, you know, if you string a pocket that's barely legal and then you put a mesh runner in it and you play with it, it could start to bag out. The ECD women's mesh pocket or mesh runner, I believe, does not bag out a whole lot, which is good. But this mesh is a full mesh piece. It's designed for women's lacrosse. It's not going to bag out on you. It has a lot of feel. It's consistent. It's weatherproof. You know, StringKing mesh. It's top of the line. From there, you know, really being able to focus primarily on stringing the top string, and then up till about this point is all you need to worry about. From there, just keep this nice and flat. You'll create a nice pocket. Being a men's player and messing around with mesh sticks quite often, I was able to find a nice pattern in this stick that would work well, and then also for men's lacrosse allowed me to really rip some corners. It had some crazy hold. Saying crazy hold, I was going to say incredible. Has some crazy hold to it. Really good feel overall. $70 head, $25 piece of mesh, $15, $20 string kit. Really can't go wrong. So thanks for watching, guys. If you're a women's player, I definitely would recommend checking this out if you have the money laying around, or maybe when summer comes around. Definitely mess around with it to pick up a piece at least and mess around with it. If you want the StringKing head, the W will come out in March. I think it's a great offering. But maybe wait a little bit and see if they come out with a better version that's more geared towards offense or defense. But if you're a men's player and you really want to try something different, pick up a piece of this mesh and throw it in a men's stick. You know, I think that's what I'm going to do with my next piece or my last piece, and see how that works. So thanks for watching, guys. As always, check out iconiclax.com down below. Got plenty of cool stuff up there, custom dyed heads. If you're a women's player, you want a custom dyed head, hit me up. I'd love to do one for you guys. If you want women's stringing, you can let me know too. I'd be more than willing to try it out. But primarily, my demographic is mostly men, probably 80%. So don't know if I would necessarily carry this right now, but maybe in the near future as women's lacrosse grows and as the women's mesh game starts to evolve into something really good. So kudos to StringKing. I think this is a killer offering. I love the innovation. I love the way that they attack the women's mesh game as opposed to other people. And overall, Type W and the Legend W head are fantastic.